Don't touch me. There are things that we just, as people, we never want to do. Laundry? Let me tell you. I can do a mean set of dirty laundry, throw them in the washer, no problem. Done. Easy peasy. Dryer, not an issue. Never seen it coming. 2 dryer sheets. But once the little ringtone plays when the dryer done, the inevitable fear of having to put all of the clothes away like sets in. It's deep impending doom. So I just put it in the corner of the room and pull clothes from it whenever I want. And then the constant anxiety lives within me, like the over impending fear of wondering if we're doing a good job in our life or not, except it's with clothes. Great time. Right. Building cars are just like that. I'm Alex at.fi on Instagram, and today we're going to be talking about how to put your we're going to be talking about one of the hardest things you can possibly do when it comes to being an automotive enthusiast outside of putting your clothes away in your closet. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most trying projects that can come out of a tiny one-stall garage with terrible lighting and more curse words than a Quentin Tarantino movie. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about you wanting to finish your garage build. I'm Alex. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension for your garage build or otherwise, be sure to check us out over at fitmentindustries.com, where we literally have everything your tiny baby heart could possibly imagine, including new lug nuts. We got some new lug nuts from Techie and some other goodies. We've also officially launched our very own wheel company, ARTISA Art-Formed Wheels, and decided to celebrate by doing a full build giveaway with Fortunato Continental tires and, of course, ARTISA Art-Formed Wheels. They're super light, they're monoblock, they're deco-directional. We spent a lot of time on it. I mean a ton if you at least want to go check them out over at fitmentindustries.com. With that stuff out of the way, let's get into the trying habits of us wanting to buy cars and then never finish them. The history of garage builds began the moment that people like you and people like me thought they were any good at taking things apart and putting them back together. Because in all honesty, we always think we're the best at everything that we do. It's like my dad always said, Alex, you can take something apart and put it back together so well that if you did it 5 times, you'd have enough spare parts after reassembly that you could probably make a second one. He threw away my 99-piece astronaut set after that. The turning point in the modification world would likely be back into the 50s, especially here in the United States, where there's tons of random people with fancy names like Edelbrock, Weiand, and Richter, American names. We're playing around with cars in their garage, trying to get them to go faster or be lighter, because that just seemed like fun after a world war. This passion was what truly fueled everything for a few decades, especially after the Second World War, with many Americans finding themselves with a healthier economy, more liquidable funds, and manufacturing a booming. The United States were doing pretty well. That's what happens, I guess. Put those things together and you get an economy that had the ability to play around with things previously deemed as only essential, like a car. But while Edelbrock actually knew what he was doing, there are countless people that have absolutely no clue what they were doing, thus beginning the era of garage builds. As the decades progressed, project cars began to make a more prominent focus in the automotive industry, mostly because of the introduction of aftermarket pieces, components into the world from those big names that I may have mentioned and probably butchered above. Why am I so bad at last names? I don't know. I'm trying. And this was mostly domestic because Japanese imports still faced a heavy onslaught of tariffs and anti-trade rules that prevented the cool modifications from overseas making their way to the good old US of A until probably the 90s and into the early 2000s. Companies would begin to pop up manufacturing all sorts of different things for vehicles as the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s started to come around. The economy surrounding the car culture in the United States grew tremendously along with that because of this new passion and hobby around automotive modification. You had brands such as American Racing, Holley, Flowmaster, MAGNAFLOW, and more all kickstarting because they wanted to make parts for their cars. And even with the growing ethical issues, recessions, and occasional impending Cold War, the consumerism in the United States could not stop people from wanting to make their cars less reliable, but neater. We're stubborn. As the 90s passed and into the 2000s, many of the anti-trade and massive tariffs were reduced, specifically from Japan and overseas, which then further caused a massive steroid to the aftermarket automotive industry, but now not just for domestic, but for Japanese or JDM cars as well. It was a true recipe for success for the cars that were made on the other side of the world, as many had begun to see the incredible value that JDM cars or Japanese import cars brought for a fraction of the cost, with better reliability, less issues, and a more inherent and better well-built driving machine experience. What? That doesn't make any sense, as many had begun to see the incredible value specifically from Japanese-made cars that you could bring in for a fraction of the cost, had better reliability, less issues, and had a really good driving experience. Japan had an insanely healthy economy during this time, and just like the domestic aftermarket performance boom of the 50s, Japan got to see theirs in the United States in the late 90s into the early 2000s. Hence why the 90s JDM cars are stacked when it comes to fancy shit, even though most of it broke. Brands like Blitz, Bride, HKS all saw massive growth opportunities here, and again, those that wanted to modify their cars saw more options, as they had more car options to pick from, potato. And while that matters for the garage build is because without the support of parts, people like you and people like me would have nothing to do with these cars outside of clean them every other week. Sure, reliability would always play a part of people playing around in the garage and doing their own maintenance, but it was these companies that laid the foundation of modifying cars to the point of actual uselessness, because it was cool. But we weren't actually that good at finishing project cars because of a lot of different reasons, and that's why we're no longer here to talk about the history of garage build. I'm not gonna yell, I'm not gonna peek the microphone. Oh no, we are here to talk about why it seems like finishing them is the equivalent of reading an actual physical book in 2021. Who does that? So you want to finish your garage build? Well, grab your favorite heater and drop off your preconceptions on doing pretty much anything right, because we're here to talk about what it's like to actually finish a garage build, and probably why most people get it wrong, and also why yours is just sitting on jack stands, and why I just pretend to never drive it. Can't be broke if you don't drive it. There may be a few reasons that your project build, aka garage build, may not be done. Those reasons can range from cash, like literally running out of money, time, because you jump back into a 9-to-5 with some OT to make the money, but now you don't have time to actually work on anything, or maybe it's the lack of passion. That one TikTok video that convinced you to finally buy an FC, you're now researching what sort of return policy exists for the rust bucket that now leaves your daily driver outside in the cold and negative 20-degree weather, because for some reason we will put our daily outside, but the rust bucket we bought will stay inside because we don't want it to get worse. We make no sense sometimes. But the real biggest reason garage builds end up never being finished is the same reason you never finish your second plate at a buffet. Your eyeballs just don't align with the good old stomach capacity. Garage builds are the things that sometimes we take too big of a project on without really understanding how or why it works that way. Engine swaps, wide body install, gear changes. These are all things that require a meticulous amount of attention to actually get right the first time, and usually more finite detail than the first time garage builder is used to. Just throw a big wing on it. Say it's a build. Good to go. Makes it easier. And just like the old Pop said, it's super easy to take things apart, but it gets a little bit harder to get it all back together and then also working in the same way that it did before. Plus, when we find out all the tools that we actually need to finish the build, we find ourselves either waiting to buy them or pray one will just miraculously show up in our garage that we don't have to pay for, because turns out tools are expensive. And another massive reason is because we lose the passion behind building it, because it's no longer fun. Play the sad Naruto music. Play the sad music. The passion goes away, and the weekends would rather be spent getting dubs on Warzone versus figuring out that one bolt you just took out wouldn't go back in, and it's super tilting. A lot of times, it's those little things that add up over time that make you not want to finish it. So how do you get back on the bandwagon of finishing your garage build? Well, that's a pretty good question, friend. Here are some tips to get that garage build actually finished and back on the rails so that you can jump into the 2021 season with a proper build built by you. And you can honestly say that because you're gonna do it, because it's not gonna get you down in the dumps, I promise. Make a list of what you actually need to complete to finish the build, and add a list of what you actually want to do to make your build happy. Start with the needs first and move to the wants afterwards. So everybody wants to dial in fitment perfectly for their new wheels and tires, but you should actually start by getting the existing wheels back on to do a test drive if you're doing anything with the motor to make sure it works so you aren't on the wrong side of the road in April because something had broken. A lot of times people like to go for the aesthetic stuff versus the maintenance stuff, and it's good to start with the maintenance stuff first. Another thing you can do is spend a day just cleaning up the space. Sometimes it can become a little overwhelming when you're well on your way into a build and the garage starts to explode a little bit. Finding that 10mm becomes just a blind screaming match and everything just gets harder to work on. Just spending a bit of time cleaning the space, getting a heater, and rearranging everything will make jumping back back into the build a second time a lot smoother and easier because everything is organized. There is nothing worse than trying to find your favorite shirt, but it's at the bottom of the bucket and then it's all wrinkly and now you're angry. And finally, start with the small stuff. When the will to finish the project goes away and it gets really hard to actually jump back into a project car, if you go back into it with a big idea, you'll probably leave demotivated and list that 240SX for $8,000 and just pray that the tax carries it. Don't do that. Start with the small stuff, small accomplishments. And as you get rolling with the small stuff, the bigger things will start to get easier to digest, especially when you want to start getting rolling on this. And just start small and get bigger over time. And then every single time you do something good, tag us on Instagram. We'll give you the thumbs up. And lastly, go share with your friends, go live, post photos, get excited and get others excited too. Going through it with friends and family is way more fun than doing it solo. And sometimes their passion will actually help carry you for those days that you don't want to finish it. Because if you got some buddies around you that are willing to talk a little smack about the fact that your project car is not done, you have more intention of actually getting it done. Positive reinforcement. Finishing a garage build is a marathon, not a sprint. And it can be a long one that can be tough to get to the finish line. So what's something that you've used to keep yourself motivated while finishing your build? Let us know below. And if you're looking for aftermarket wheels, tires, or suspension, be sure to hit us up over at fitmentindustries.com. I can still remember more times than I can count when I was working on my Datsun, I literally had to take days off to finish it. And I dedicated 1 day a week off for 6 hours each day, 1 day per week to finally get it finished. And it was like the toughest thing in the world, but it was also extremely, extremely rewarding. So understand that you guys can definitely do it if there's a time to get it done. Motivational speech, cue the music. We'll see you later. Peace.